What's going on, everybody? You are listening to the Co-Living Show. My name is Craig Curelop,
I'm Miller McSwain.
and we've got a little bit of a different episode for you today. And the last time I said that, it was a solo episode. But today, it is not a solo episode. What's
No,
up?
we're bringing someone in today about a topic that we have no clue about for the most part. You know how people always say, blah, 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 here's my thought, but you should talk to a lawyer. And then no one ever follows up and talks to the lawyer. That's what we're doing today on this show. We bring in a lawyer. His name is Sam Hooper, and he is all in on co-living and all in on legislation, which is the part that we know nothing about.
Yes, and you'll find that me and Miller are not lawyers, but this guy is a lawyer, and you'll notice that he did not say he's not a lawyer on the call. So he also didn't really give any sort of specific advice to anybody, more of just the broad spectrum. But if you're looking to make a change at the root of a co-living problem, and I'm not talking, we talk a little bit about this in the episode of, I think membership leases are BS, personally. I think doing things with even a master lease and subleases, I think is BS. You're just trying to skirt around the rules. That really does not work at scale. It's much easier and much better, and actually changes the whole dynamic of what you're doing is if you change it by the root, which is changing the law. And that's what we're talking about today, is like lobbying in your local area, lobbying on a higher level. How do you lobby? How do you get the rules changed in your favor so that we can show everybody how great co-living is for the community and how we can truly make a big change? So I thought it was a fantastic episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And in addition to that, it's also super tactical, super strategic. You guys will get to hear what sort of areas around the country are trending in the right direction, or maybe already in like a good spot as far as their co-living regulations being pretty friendly, versus what areas maybe you don't need to stay away from these areas, but you at least need to be aware of what's going on in some of these like hot spots that Sam goes over that are at the very least just riskier than other areas of the country.
Yeah, I thought that was super, super helpful. And then, yeah, honestly, one of my biggest takeaways was just go talk to your state legislator. Like it's not like talking to the president of the United States. Like they're actually like very close to the people. Mm-hmm. And so be one of the people, be the change you want to be. But yeah, so that we'll get into it a lot more in the episode. So definitely make sure you listen all the way to the end. It's a great time. Miller, what's new? What's new with you, man? You got anything? We always just hop right into it.
Yeah, I'm direct like that. Me and Craig will hop on a meeting and he's like, so how's your day? I'm like, all right, our first meeting agenda item. Yeah, I guess biggest thing on our side, we are moving from Colorado. So we are moving to Montana, which is where my wife's originally from. And anyway, we're just stoked to get out that way. But really, I think it'll be interesting. I'm sure there will be we've set our portfolio up in such a way and me and Craig have set our businesses up in such a way that, yeah, even though I live within an hour or two of every single one of our houses, there's no reason for me to live that close. I went to some of our properties in Denver for the very first time whenever I was touring around Sam Wiegert's group from Scale Your Real Estate. I was showing them some of our houses, and I'd never even been to those houses before. So fortunately, we set things up in such a way to be able to do that. But yeah, we're excited to get out in the boonies, and I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe get eaten by a grizzly. We'll see.
Yeah, you're not going to do a whole lot, but you'll be able to put on your robot glasses and go into some alternate universe or something. That's always cool. Before we get into the episode, we've got a question from the co-living community from Linda Brown. Do you find that putting cameras in the common areas for safety attract or detract applicants?
Yeah, honestly, this one's kind of hard to answer. So yeah, let's see. Okay. So the reason for cameras is not necessarily on the marketing side. It's not necessarily there to attract tenants or detract them. We can talk about that. But the primary reason is 100% on the operations, right? It is about once people are in the house, right? So not marketing, but once people are in the house, like you said, safety, okay? Keeping people safe. Also, if we do need to get someone who's out, this now gives us like a strong base, like factual base that we can bring in. We can pull footage in. We can use that as proof whenever we're trying to get someone out. So those are the primary motivators there. But yeah, honestly, if anything, it definitely doesn't help on the marketing side. I would say it's probably neutral to negative, and that is at the cost of having a business that you can systematize, that you can kick people out whenever you need to. It is definitely a trade. But I'll say, I don't think we've had anyone reach out like on the marketing side and be like super concerned about it, but I'm sure some people do silently get turned away. The only thing that I've tried to do marketing wise here is I was talking with my sister whenever we were putting these in, and I was like, hey, what would you think as a woman coming into a co-living property and there's like cameras in there? Does that make you feel safe or not safe? And she said her first instinct whenever I said it was not safe. It sounds like weird, creepy, that kind of thing as a woman. And then I brought up the thing about, hey, like maybe it like reduces the odds. And again, this like typically would not happen, but reduces the odds of like sexual assault or reduces the odds of anything like that. And she was like, yeah, that does sound good. So like now that you explained it, that does sound good. But that was not her first thought. So we've never led with that. But
here's my thought. I think Miller almost broke because there's no data supporting it.
yeah.
So like, here's my thought from the perspective of, obviously I'm not a woman, but I am married and I try to keep my wife's thoughts in mind and all that kind of stuff and her safety in mind, is that if a woman sees a camera, you always go to the worst possible situation. Like someone is watching me for like sexual purposes, for to be creepy, like they want to see me like walking around in my bra, like that kind of thing. But not the case, right? The way that we would describe it is, hey, this, you have to think of this as like a hotel or like an apartment building where in the common areas there are cameras, just monitor cameras. We don't look at them. We don't really, the only time we look at them is if something happens. And so, God forbid, someone brings a guest home that does something, that steals something, that whatever it might be, we now have record of it. We can bring that to the police and the police can take the proper action. Otherwise, we're playing the he said, she said game, which we do not want to play. Right. And so now it's like you're coming in, you like, you got to feel what they're feeling and like just kibosh that. And like, obviously, like the bathrooms and the bedrooms are still private spaces with no camera access. So, yeah. Anyway, it is a little bit of a long out drawn question, but I think like I wasn't sold on cameras. Miller sold me on cameras and now I'm sold on cameras. So if you need to change your mind, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, maybe it is like a slight detractor on marketing, but you can still see we have definitely filled our rooms up very, very quickly. So I think it's more about, hey, we can now keep our houses operating well and we can still bring people in really fast. Maybe it's like 1% slower because 1 out of 100 person sees the camera and doesn't want to move in, but we can keep people in there longer, keep the right people in there, community safer. So the benefits totally outweigh.
Okay. We got something special for you guys real quick before jumping into the episode today. We are doing something that we have not done in a long time. So through, we'll call it Miller and I's efforts, but mostly Miller's efforts, we've finally been able to achieve 90+% occupancy in our portfolio.
Like we have 3 vacant rooms.
We've got 3 vacant rooms out of like 180 or something like that. Yeah. And we stopped taking on management clients. We stopped even buying some stuff, mainly just so we can stabilize the portfolio and make sure that when we take on new clients, it's like for a good reason, we can provide a good service. We're at the spot now where we need to take on new people. And so if you've got a co-living home in the Denver area in particular, reach out to us, shoot me a text or shoot me a message on Instagram. I'm Craig Curelop on Instagram, and let's just have a conversation. We could potentially help manage your house. We could potentially partner in some sort of way, but we are looking to we definitely want to help and support. And so if the management side is exhausting or you want to scale and you need a manager as part of your team, let us know. We are here to help you in that regard. That being said, should we bring on Mr. Sam Hooper?
Let's do it.
Sam Hooper. Sam Hooper, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today, man?
Thank you very much indeed for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time. And you were at the co-living conference, right? Back in Denver?
I was, yes. It was, I believe, the second national conference that happened, the first one that I'd been invited to, and it was great. Never had I been around so many people working in all different aspects of the co-living industry before. I went there to sit in the panel, but I think I learned a lot more from other people than I taught them, probably.
I love it. Yeah. The cool thing about conferences, especially like when you're in the niche, is like you finally feel like people get it and they know what you're doing, right? Rather than like needing to try to explain that, yeah, there's 10 people living in a house and no, they don't fight all the time. And yeah, there's more, like the same questions over and over again. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Man.
Yeah. Being understood is nice. Like I attend a lot of conferences. Like I'm a legislative attorney. I attend a lot of what most people would think of as really boring policy conferences where you're just sitting there listening to people talk about law review articles and things like that. So being in a room where like I don't have to corner unfortunate souls and then bore them about co-living and explain to them what it is was really nice, actually. Everyone already gets it. That's great. We start from a much higher base of knowledge. So it was really refreshing for me to be there in that group.
I love it. Sam, can you just tell me what the heck is a legislative attorney? What does that even mean?
It's a good question. If you'd asked me a few years ago, I wouldn't have known either. People think of attorneys either the guy on the billboard that helps you if you've been in a 18-wheeler wreck, or someone, a transactional attorney. But a legislative attorney is someone that works in somewhere in the legislative process, actually writing the bills that other lawyers then either get to argue about or advise their clients to stay within the rules. So both at the federal level in Washington, D.C., and at the state and local level in your state legislature or city hall, you'll often have legislative attorneys that help actually draft the bills, resolutions, constitutional amendments sometimes that lawmakers then end up voting on. So the role, I basically, you could say, is it's translating a policy goal into legislative language that then ends up on the statute books one day.
Okay. So how do you become a successful legislative attorney? How do you delineate between a good and a bad one?
Well, I can tell you how I became one. Whether I'm good or not, I don't know.
We'll say that you're good. That's why you're on the show.
It's a narrow field. I got my start working as a drafting attorney for the Texas Legislative Council. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and the Texas Legislative Council is the agency that works for the state legislature that drafts bills. So I got really good technical training in sitting down with legislators, listening to them say, I want a bill that does this, lowers property taxes or imposes higher criminal penalty for something, and then writing that in proper statutory language so then the rest of the legislature can go debate and vote on it. I did that for a couple of years. In that role, you have to be strictly neutral. You cannot bring your own personal views or whatsoever into it. You're just the pen, basically, through which the mind of the legislator writes. And after I did that for a while, and it was great training, but I decided I'm tired of having to keep my own views to myself. I'm a very opinionated person, and I wanted a job where I could actually say what I thought all the time. So then I went to a legal nonprofit called the Institute for Justice. They're a kind of civil liberties nonprofit law firm. They work a lot in the area of economic liberty, property rights, housing reform. And so that's really how I first got into the area of housing reform. By a lot of states now, they understand there's a big housing crisis out there. They're trying to update their laws to get rid of a lot of these old restrictions on housing, what you can and can't build. IJ was a leader in that space. So I was very involved in different statewide coalitions, not just in Texas, trying to update those bills. So whether you're a good legislative attorney, I guess you're a good one if more of your bills pass. But there are so many things that mean whether a bill passes or doesn't pass in the legislature. That's not down to any one individual. And another thing is whether the bill stands the test of time. It's one thing to pass a bill, like a lot of people can do that, but will there be unintended consequences? Would it actually hurt the people you're trying to help? That's the last thing you want to do. You might pass a bill that's trying to deregulate, but it ends up raising costs unexpectedly or barring people from doing what they want to do. So there's a lot of foresight. It really blends policy and a bit of political strategy and all those different kind of things, and principle as well. It helps to have a clear guiding set of principles. And I don't know, I probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally American. I moved here, I married a Texan. I moved to America in 2018, but I still don't even really know where I fall on the American political spectrum. But I have clear views. I believe in economic liberty, property rights. So I just try and let that shine through my work. And I think that makes a good legislative attorney as well.
Does your wife have a Southern accent?
She's from McAllen, Texas. She's right from the border. She doesn't have the Texas twang, but she has your typical Texas accent that I haven't yet picked up somehow.
Okay. I was going to say, if somehow like your kids could be like, if only like your accents could like, you could take a little bit of one accent, a little bit of the other and merge together to be like, yeah, I've got like a British Southern accent. Your kids would be the most popular.
That's what we're hoping for, the hybrid. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, they'd be the most popular kids in school for sure. So, okay, Sam. Okay, so like you came here, legislative attorney. Man, that would never be on my bingo card of something I didn't even knew existed, honestly. But it's funny, like there's jobs for everything out there. How did you get roped in to co-living?
Yeah, so I was working at this nonprofit, working on housing reform already, and a lot of states were considering other housing reforms, right? Reducing minimum lot sizes so you could build smaller starter homes, or allowing accessory dwelling units and granny flats, or building more apartments. No one was talking about this one form of co-living that I happen to have personal experience of, because before I was ever a lawyer, when I was a young college grad in London, looking for somewhere to live that was affordable, I ended up living in a co-living building in London. It was a lot cheaper. I wanted to live somewhere central in a nice neighborhood. London's a very expensive city. So I ended up living in a co-living building that was specifically designed for young professionals with their first job in London. And it was divided into little flats. Each flat had a kitchen. And then as a whole building, it shared a gym and a movie theater room and stuff. It had a management company that would put on social events. And it was at that building that I met a lot of my lifelong friends and actually met the woman who later became my wife. She was over from America studying in business school. So I knew about co-living. I had personal experience that this is a great way to live. Not everyone needs or wants a full apartment building. Not everyone wants a single family home. If you do, that's great. People go through different phases of life, and sometimes co-living is exactly what people need. It worked for me. And then I realized there's so many rules and regulations in America that mean it's not possible. And that didn't used to be the case, right? In the early 20th century, single room occupancy of various kinds was very common. And then through zoning code, building code, occupancy, it was just regulated out of existence. So in my role at the nonprofit, I thought, what can we do to try and bring that back? And so I wrote a model bill. I called it the Room Act, which stands for Restoring Options in Occupancy Models, that would basically take a scythe to all of those regulations that get in the way of co-living and just would legalize co-living by right anywhere that you can build any other kind of housing. It's big, it's bold. I moved on and founded my own practice before we could really get much traction. But one of the things I'm most looking forward to doing now is working with the co-living industry, trying to get that bill or other legislation like it passed, because yeah, I believe in it from a property rights perspective. That's my ideological thing, but I've lived it as well. I lived in a co-living building. It was amazing. It was the best time of my life for 18 months in London, and everyone should have that opportunity if they want it, just like they should have access to any other kind of housing.
Yeah. So Sam, since you also lived in co-living in Europe, I'm just kind of curious, what are the regulations like over there? Like here, I think pretty much most places lean towards being strict. Like on average, that's probably the case. Like the regulations are strict on co-living. So kind of what was it like in London and like other parts of Europe? And yeah, just kind of curious how that compares.
Yeah, co-living is a lot more common in most of Europe. So generally speaking, I wouldn't advise anyone in America to take any lessons from Britain when it comes to housing. Britain's housing crisis is way worse. The land use rules are worse. One thing for some reason they do well in Britain generally is they allow co-living. If you can build any kind of apartment, you can often build co-living as well. And there's this kind of expectation culturally that it's normal. It's not something unusual. You have to explain to people, whether you're in London or Amsterdam or a lot of other cities, people understand that, yeah, particularly when you're starting out a career, going through a life transition, moving to a new city, co-living can be a great way to test out neighborhoods, do that kind of thing. So it's less over-regulated there, unlike a bunch of other things. So that's good. And I just assumed that was the case here. When I first moved to America, I moved to Washington, D.C., which is a very itinerant city. There are lots of people that come for a little while and leave. So you do have some co-living buildings there. So it took me a while to realize that even DC is the exception in America. Most American cities, most states don't make it that easy to operate co-living buildings. So that was a real learning for me.
Do you think it's just that European countries have been around longer? You said the culture is different. Is there a reason behind that and why the US culture is different?
Something changed in US culture because co-living was very common up until the early 20th century. Up to 10% of Americans either lived in some form of single room occupancy co-living housing or rented out a room of their own to someone else. And then gradually that changed. And there was a reason, we have to be honest, that some of those older forms of co-living fell out of fashion. There was overcrowding, there were slums, there were dirty, dangerous tenements, there were fire issues, but all of those have been dealt with through modern fire and building regulations. But that mid-century urban renewal, just trying to push everyone out into the suburbs, making the goal the single-family home with the white picket fence, I think that just changed cultural expectations. And then it just not only do people forget about co-living as a form that you could choose, regulators forgot the language to regulate them. So even if you go to a city now and say, hey, can we regulate this? Like they'll look at you like you're crazy and you have to go back to the beginning and explain what co-living is just because it's fallen out of American cultural memory somehow. So I really want to help bring that back.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that we can give people a good starting entry point here into this episode. So it sounds like you do a lot of work in Texas, but I think this is pretty general across the country. What are like the different types of regulations that are pretty common that people might run into when they're trying to buy a house, rent it out by the room?
Sure. The biggest obstacle, the first and biggest obstacle that people face when they're trying to get into co-living, especially at the smaller scale, just renting out a room, is occupancy limits. I think everyone's familiar with that. a lot of cities, they'll define family in a way, or they'll have a rule saying you can only have so many unrelated people living together in a building. And often that number can be very low. It could be 4, it could be less than 4. And often that just immediately kills the ability to do any kind of room rentals, particularly the kind of pad split model, or wherever you're renting a kind of single family home. So that's the first thing. If you change the definition of family, as some states are starting to do, or if you just get rid of those arbitrary limits and say you can only limit the number of people living in a building based on genuine health and safety, not arbitrary rules like whether they're related or not, which is dumb, immediately you open up the possibility for people to rent out spare rooms. And then you enable that first form of co-living, which, from my understanding, is how a lot of people first get into co-living in the first place. They might be house hacking, doing things like that. So that's number one. Second thing is zoning. From 1926, when the Supreme Court said that modern zoning is legal, unfortunately, any form of co-living, even multifamily, just apartments, was zoned out of huge parts of American cities. And the only thing you can build in large swathes of even very big cities is single-family homes, your typical detached house. And if that's possible, then you can't have co-living in large areas again. And that's another huge thing you have to tackle. So if you want to re-legalize co-living, you've got to change zoning as well. And then third thing, building code. Rules about single staircases, requirement to have 2 staircases, requirement if you have so many people in a house, you now have to have a sprinkler system, you have to have things like that. You have to have operable windows in larger co-living buildings. That can also destroy the economics sometimes of co-living. And then the fourth thing I just thought of, but is also important, those few co-living buildings that remain, often there are really paternalistic rules about how people live in them. Because the few co-living buildings that survive, often they're things like sober living homes or recovery houses. And they'll have strict rules, and they'll have all kind of regulations like guest visitor logs and surveillance system requirements and things that again add cost and just stigmatize the idea of co-living and make it seem like something other, something unnatural that we need to monitor carefully. So those 4 things: occupancy limits, zoning, building code, and usage laws. If you change just occupancy limits, you make it a lot easier. If you get rid of all 4, then you really unleash a co-living revolution across America, I think.
Yeah. And so if an investor is in their city and they're interested in buying this property, where should they go to look for these regulations? Are they at the state level, county level, city level, like neighborhood level? And like, how do they actually find that?
That's a really tricky thing because it varies so much state by state and city by city. Generally speaking, the city level is going to be your best bet for you're looking at buying a new building, what's allowed and what is the neighborhood zoned for. That'll give you your first clue. If you're on somewhere that's denser, multifamily, maybe you're going to have a better shot immediately because they understand more people living in one building. If it's single family, you're more likely to run into issues of occupancy limits and things like that. All that will be at the city level. You might get lucky though, because some states, I look at New Hampshire, Texas to some degree, some of the Pacific Northwestern states, they've started to look at occupancy limits on a statewide level, and they've stopped cities from being able to say you can only have so many people living under a roof that are unrelated. So if you're lucky, if you're in one of those states, then you don't have to worry about occupancy limits, and immediately you can move to that early form of co-living, the kind of pad split model, which is great. But generally speaking, the state won't save you yet. It's going to be your city, and it's even going to be restrictive covenants, HOAs and things will also have rules about co-living as well. You've got to watch out for as well. So it's all of the above.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the reason I brought up the neighborhood one. I think it's one that people don't think about a lot. HOA is like literally like a mini government over your neighborhood that might even have like crazier rules than your city or your state and all that. So yeah, for anyone out there that's considering buying a property and you don't know the rules yet, check state, county, city, neighborhood. And Sam, whenever they're doing that, is this like a Google search? Is this a AI search? Is this a phone call? Is it an email?
I'm really impressed by the power of AI, I won't lie. You should never immediately trust legal analysis from it, but it can be great, particularly if you're not conversant with the law and how it works. Find your source. The best source is official city website, probably. That's where you should go first, because that will have what their lawyers will tell you is the version of the truth for what you can and can't build somewhere. But then by all means, take that elsewhere, verify it against other sources, preferably speak to a local attorney as well to be sure. But yeah, go to the city first would be my advice.
Is there like a hierarchy of law that rules? Like, so for example, is it okay? There's like the HOA rules, but if the HOA rules conflict against like county rules, then the county rules win. And is there like a hierarchy of HOA, county, state, federal? Or
yeah, so HOAs fit awkwardly within that, but there's a hierarchy in terms of the state can preempt local rules. So generally speaking, most states will give cities the power to decide zoning. There are exceptions to that, but often cities are home rule cities. They can decide that. States, though, have the ability to preempt that. If they think that cities are being too restrictive, as we've seen a lot of states, Texas, New Hampshire, Florida, Virginia, a bunch of states, they see housing not being built. So they can preempt the ability of cities to prevent certain kinds of housing or require them to allow certain forms of housing in areas. So that's one level up, and they can stop that. HOAs sit awkwardly outside that because it's a private contract. So it's people, generally people often long dead, who once lived in the neighborhood, agreeing amongst themselves that we shall never allow an ADU to be built in our backyard. And then everyone forevermore is held to this requirement. And it can be a real pain to change, which is super annoying.
Yeah, we ran into an issue recently with one of the houses that we managed where there was a really small HOA, and the HOA was basically like in Colorado, there's a law that passed that says local governments cannot limit the amount of unrelated people living in a room or living in a house. So boom, that's like a co-living law written right there. But we still had trouble given this one HOA who did have this rule and all this kind of stuff. And so, and Miller, correct me, I think you were more in it than me, but correct me if I got that wrong. But
okay, well, you did get it wrong real quick. So
okay.
I still think it's a good example. Yeah, it's still a really good example for us to go through, though. So the issue that we hit in this neighborhood, all right, so like Craig said, Colorado, House Bill, whatever passed, local governments are no longer allowed to set unrelated occupancy rules. So people think that, hey, Colorado is like the golden co-living state. You can go there, you can have 20 people in a house, cash flow like crazy, and you're good to go. But the issue that we hit on a property that we manage was it was more of the zoning type issue that is talked about like way less. So we have this property. I don't remember. It's rented out by the room to eight bedrooms, I think, or so. We only had 2 people in there because like we had just onboarded it. But we got a notice from the city, and it said that we were operating illegally we were operating as a co-living / boarding house, which is not a use case in single family zoning. So does that sound familiar, Sam? Do you hear things like that?
Yeah, all too common, unfortunately. Even in states that pass reforms like Colorado did, cities are often slow to catch up. And we see this particularly in cities that are restrictive to this. Even if they can't technically ban something, they will do everything they can to make you feel like you're living in this gray area sometimes. So even though you can point to the state statute that says you can do this, they might not necessarily start formal enforcement against you, but they will send people round to the house sometimes to investigate. They'll send warnings and things, and that can be really annoying. We see it not just with co-living, but with other things as well. I'm based in Texas, and we passed a bill recently that would allow you to build residential accommodation in commercial areas. So great, it's building apartments near jobs and recreation where people live. Some cities really didn't want to do that, and they're fighting furiously against it. They're abiding by the state law, but they're imposing all these ridiculous requirements on those apartments in commercial areas, such as they'll never pencil. And exactly the same thing happens with co-living rights as well. Sometimes they're genuinely late to get the memo. They don't realize that the state's preempted them. Other times they know exactly what they're doing, but they just don't want that kind of housing. And that can be really tricky. And often you'll then need an attorney to gently point out to them what they should be doing and what they should be allowing.
Yeah. And like in this case, I don't think they were wrong. They weren't conflicting with the state law that you can have unlimited people in your houses anymore. This was different. This said that, hey, if you're doing co-living, you're not allowed to do it in single family. You have to be in duplex, triplex, fourplex, like R2, R3, R4, like type zoning. So I don't think they were necessarily wrong in that. It didn't conflict. But the problem was the the city regulations didn't define what co-living was. So it was like, this is a use case, but they never defined the use case. So then I asked the inspector guy, or like whatever you want to call him, that was walking around, and I called him. But anyway, he said that co-living / boarding house under their regs is not defined, but generally what it means is separate sleeping spaces that are lockable, that have shared amenities such as kitchens, bathrooms, living spaces, things like that. Is that kind of like a good definition for co-living / boarding house when you think about like zoning in different areas?
Yeah, that sounds really good, actually. We defined it very similarly in the model legislation that we wrote. So yeah, if you generally talking about individual lockable bedrooms or sleeping units, like that language is the operative language that we look to see.
Okay. All right. So then let's do a little thought experiment here. So let's say that someone is considering buying a property, or they already have it, and whatever, they're having some frustrations with the cities. Not that any of this is legal advice or anything, but if someone's encountering an occupancy limit issue, What ways have you seen people interact with that issue, and what solutions have they come up with to continue operating as co-living? And what is the risk associated with some of these paths?
Yeah, so the differing degrees of risk depending on what path you take. The most common and the first way that I saw people trying to deal with this is through master leases. So often the way that cities will try and enforce is if they see like individual rooms being leased, then that can trip flags immediately. Or if they see rooms being just advertised to rent as well, then that can be what leads to an enforcement action. If you go the master lease route, which is what some of the co-living platforms do. The one I'm familiar with is PadSplit, but I know there are plenty of others as well. You're then just signing one lease on the property, and then people sign a membership, so they're not individually leasing the rooms. So that's one way to get around that idea that you're leasing individual sleeping units or rooms beyond whatever the occupancy limits or the zoning would allow. And that's probably the best bet because master leases are universally understood. Lawyers understand them, the city understands them. That's great. Other ways, I've seen people try and be really inventive sometimes. Things like large houses sometimes recreated as duplexes effectively, so that a house that might have 12 sleeping units is nominally divided into two houses of 6. You might put 2 kitchens in, so there's very little then intermingling between the residents of either side, even though there's not a formal separation. So you can engage architects and builders and contractors to do things like that, change the physical layout of the house somehow so that you don't run into those things. So those are just 2 examples right there.
Here's my feeling on all this stuff is like the law and everything is put into place for a reason, right? And like we can probably understand the government's reason and like the legislators' reasons for doing so. And these like wonky loopholes to me is just like a bunch of gobbledygook or whatever. Like it's just a bunch of not like sure it might work for 1 or 2, but come on, like in court in real life, like the rules are just going to change to put an extra sentence in there to like totally thwart the thing that you just did. So what's the best way if you're an investor to just do things like the total right way and like maybe get creative with it still, but like still just do it the right way?
So you're exactly right. The rules of the game are very opaque at the moment, and they vary city by city. And that just makes it difficult for any industry to grow, because if you're constantly worried that a court's going to reinterpret a clause in a statute in a way that just kills your business model, like how can you have the confidence to invest and grow? That's why I'm passionate about economic liberty. It's why I work on other bills. We worked on the food truck freedom bill in Texas, because in Texas, you need a separate health permit in every single city where you operate, which is just ridiculously expensive and duplicative. We replaced that with a statewide permit. And so ultimately, any property lawyer could advise a co-living operator on a bunch of tricks or use this one special rule to get around things. Like, you'll still be living in the gray, unfortunately. And that sucks. The hope is that you can change the rules of the game. You can engage in the legislative process and actually rewrite the rules to formally define co-living, so it's not this weird thing people don't understand. And then if you do that, if you redefine the rules, make clearer laws, then you get that predictability for everyone.
Yeah, that to me is like you're attacking you're like attacking the problem at the root, not shaving off the very top of a weed until it grows again tomorrow, kind of thing, right?
Hey guys, the tool I've been talking about forever, Co-Living Pro, is now officially live. So some of the biggest problems that I've encountered around co-living are always on the marketing side. So you can think of Co-Living Pro as a marketing software or a tool to help you overcome some of these marketing issues that we all run into in the co-living space. So number one, it helps you determine what to price your room at and then how to change that price over time. And that's actually a free tool. You can go there to colivingpro.io, and there's a little like rentometer type tool where you can punch in an address, punch in a zip, punch in a city, and kind of see what rooms might rent for there. But it does that for you. And number two, historically, for us to keep our rooms operating at full capacity, especially when we're off a PadSplit, it's meant that we had to post on Zillow, post on Zumper, post on Apartments, post on Roomies, post on all these places. And with just a 5-bedroom house, that's already 20 listings right there, which is a lot of work, a lot of time and effort. So Co-Living Pro helps you solve this. You just make your listing on this one site and it pushes it to Zillow, pushes it to Zumper, and we even support any platform with the manual listing manager. So you can still be on Apartments, still be on Roomies, still be on PadSplit, still be on anything. And it's kind of a wizard that helps you stay organized, your VA stay organized. It shows you what rooms need to be posted where with just quick copy paste prompts. Copy your rent over, copy your description over, boom, you're good to go. And number three, historically, now that you're on all these sites, we always had to hop in daily or at least weekly to keep these listings up at the top, keep the pricing up to date. So Co-Living Pro solves that for you too. It's making those adjustments for you on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, to make sure your listings are updated across your platforms. So you guys know everything I've always done has been free. The community is free. This podcast is free. I'm super proud of that and definitely going to keep doing all that. But this tool is paid, but I feel comfortable doing that because the numbers are honestly pretty insane. So if you go to Co-Living Pro, there is a calculator where you can do this for your own situation. But let's take that example earlier of the 1 5-bedroom property. From that, we estimate you'll make an extra $1,400 a year in extra rent and reduced vacancy. And that is 5x what the tool costs. Let me say that again. This tool produces 5x the return of what it costs. So in this example, that's actually a better return than most co-living properties themselves, being around 15, 16%. So seriously, to me, this is a no-brainer. So head over to colivingpro.io. This is the tool that I built for my own business, and I'm so happy that I can finally share it with you guys. And back to the episode.
So I guess, okay, I want to ask you another opinion. My brain's going too many things at once here. The membership agreements, I'm sure you've heard of them with what Pad Split does and all that. So to me, I look at that and I see that as like a total nonsense BS thing. I'm like, you look at those agreements and sure, maybe the first line on that agreement says this is not a lease, but it sure looks like a lease. It sure smells like a lease. It sure tastes like a lease. It sure feels like a lease. It's probably a lease kind of thing is like how I feel like the courts and stuff would rule it.
And I know we're advocates. So what would a judge think?
I want that to work. Trust me, that would be great for our business. I'm just like, come on, man, no way. And maybe it works in an instance. And I know Pad Split has had some success going up to the Supreme Court with it, but I just don't think that's like long-term going to play out favorably. And I guess I'm just curious, like from a lawyer's and a legislator's perspective, like I'm just some random dude with an opinion. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It works until it doesn't work, and generally until it gets litigated, it will work. It works well enough that you can open and operate, and that's great. But every co-living operator, every landlord at some point is going to have an issue with a tenant. They're going to have an issue with a city. There's going to have to be something that you litigate, and at that point, as you say, it looks and smells like a traditional lease and a tenancy, and courts are generally going to interpret it in that way, particularly if you live in a state that has generally more favorably pro-tenant rules as well. And again, that's something that varies jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So I think it's great. I think it's a great bridging intermediate model while we're living through this weird period where the rules of the game are uncertain and people just need something that gives them some level of predictability, some way to open and operate co-living. In the long run, we need to establish proper writing, proper definitions of co-living so that you don't have to rely on any one model, so that maybe we make membership agreements clearer. If people want to keep doing that's great, but we also make it possible for people to just lease out individual rooms if they want to do that as well. There needs to be the terminology to do that. We need to have that certainty. Yeah, definitely.
I feel like that's it right there. Is like, how can we get the lobbyists in the authorities, whoever's in charge, like to make it so you can just it's legal to evict somebody out of a room. Like it's just, a room is treated like almost like an apartment unit. And then my other question was like, okay, so I'm glad we're on the same page there. I feel the same way of like it works until it doesn't. The other question I had was, let's say someone, they got 1, 2, 3 properties, want to try to make a change from a legislative perspective so that what they're doing is signed, sealed, delivered, everybody knows about it and approves it. What is like that process or step for someone to take?
Good question. It's one of the things people don't realize how easy it is to get involved in the legislative process, like at a grassroots level. State legislators, particularly if you're in a smaller state, but really any state, they're a lot closer to their constituents than your congressman or your senator, and they're a lot more responsive. They have to run for election every 2, 4, 6 years. Like they care what people think, and they particularly care what job creators, entrepreneurs, people that provide housing think. So the first thing to do, like anyone can just call up, visit if you live in your state capital, but just visit with your local representative, tell them. There's been a lack of education. People don't understand what co-living is. So I'm still in the process where I'm having to go to meetings with people and tell them that. So And the first thing to do, the best thing to do, as with any relationship, go see someone, establish a good relationship with them before you have a live issue, right? So that then there's got that basis of goodwill. If something does come up later on, they already know you, they know you're operating in good faith. That can really help. But that only goes so far, right? If you're a small operator, you're probably busy 98% of the time just running your business. You don't have a whole bunch of time to be being a professional lobbyist working on reform as well, nor honestly should you have to. And that's the other thing that's really been missing, because every other industry has a voice in the legislative process. Some might say too much voice sometimes. You look at any industry, they've got lobbyists, they've got a professional association. If lawmakers are themselves thinking, oh, how do we regulate this industry? They know who to call to run the idea by, whether it's the energy, oil and gas, healthcare. Co-living doesn't have anything like that, hasn't had anything like that. Multifamily housing does, single-family home builders do. So it's really important that the co-living industry can come together, speak with one voice as well, and educate lawmakers first and foremost, and then advocate for changes at the state and local level. That's where you see the force multiplier, because you might only, as an individual operator, have 2% of your time to spare. But by joining an association, maybe paying your dues, helping, maybe just helping them out by testifying, so writing a letter to your local legislator, so when they're considering a bill, they can read it. All of that helps a lot more than one individual doing something. And that's the work I've been excited about recently, because we're trying to form exactly that association right now.
I was going to say, I felt at the conference and stuff like that, they were mentioning the formation of some sort of thing. Is that right? We weren't there, but I was following and seeing what was going on.
Yeah, so because it's been missing, it's been decided to form a national co-living association that would do exactly that. It would be the voice of the industry. So just like Casita Coalition exists to represent accessory dwelling units, and it does everything, right? It educates lawmakers, but it also provides education and support for people that build backyard flats and cottages. The National Co-living Association will do exactly the same thing. It'll provide member benefits for co-living operators. It'll educate them. But the most important thing to do is it'll send lobbyists, attorneys, people like me into state capitals and city halls to have those meetings with lawmakers, to have those repetitious conversations explaining what co-living is 101 for the 100th time to someone with a puzzled look on their face. Get them to understand it, get them to get a positive interpretation and reception to it, so that then when we try and pass a bill to make it easier, it's more likely to pass. It's really important that we do that, because we've seen industries that haven't done that, haven't engaged as quickly. Look at short-term rentals, Airbnb, things like that, providing a useful service, but allowed themselves to be defined by their opponents. And now, unfortunately, they're seen as the root of all evil, the cause of the housing crisis, and the evil incarnate. Like, co-living is great. I've benefited for myself. I believe in it. I don't want to see it go down that route. So I'd much rather the association come in strong and be that force for change. And I'm really excited. I think it's going to happen.
That's interesting. It's one of those things, like when you just say it, it sounds so obvious, but when I never thought of it before. But yeah, the Airbnb just kind of came in, and all the STR operators, like they just kind of came in and took over without any sort of, just like wreaked havoc basically in the real estate market. But I love the approach that I feel like the co-living team co-living needs to take of, let's get on board with the government. And Miller and I have been on the same page with like our investing. Like, we're only going to be buying properties in places that the legislation is on board and good. And I know other people don't, and they try to like work around it. We don't think things are scalable if you're not playing by the rules. That's great.
If you get 20 houses in one place, and Craig said like one line changes, like I think it's just bigger risk than people think. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe you can go to whatever part of Georgia or Florida or whatever and get awesome returns. But what's the risk associated with that return? It might be really high versus if you go somewhere else where maybe it is a little bit more established. There are already rules in place. Maybe it is a lower return there. Maybe it's not. But that return is like a heck of a lot more guaranteed, that it's not just like one pin stroke away like it is in a lot of places.
Yeah, from my time at the co-living conference in Denver, I saw so much entrepreneurialism there, people coming up with all these different great models, and it's great. But I also saw time and time again was people hitting a limit in how much they could expand. They've got 3-4 properties maybe, but now they're trying to juggle different rules in different jurisdictions. And if you're one person or a small team, like, you can only keep so much law in your head at one time. And it shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't be this jigsaw puzzle where every single city operates under different rules. And I think that's why getting involved in policy, at least in some way, at least being aware that this whole world, people like me, legislative lawyers, lobbyists, people that are out there doing this is important because it matters. This is what changes the rules of the game that you guys operate under. And much better that you understand that and seek to influence it in your favor than just let it happen to you and be inflicted upon you without you having a say.
Yeah. Let's kind of dive deep on that. Or actually, let's not dive deep. Let's get cloud level here. So if people are open to different markets at this point, like maybe they do already have co-living experience, but they're seeing the risk and like, maybe I should find somewhere else to do this. Or maybe they're like looking for their very first market. Can you give people kind of a view of, like, literally, if we went through a list, like what are the best places legally? And that's all we're talking about here is like legally, like maybe the returns are different in certain places and all that. But what are some of the really good places people can go? Like, I know some states have done a good job of that. Some cities maybe have done a good job of that. What are some really good options, places that people can go where they do not have as much risk as they do in some of these hotspots?
Yeah, so I haven't looked carefully at every single state in the union, but places I know that are doing good things on co-living, Pacific Northwest, Washington State, Oregon have both done a lot to legalize co-living. They've defined it in state statute, which is great. And particularly even at the multifamily level, letting you build those larger co-living units, whether you're trying to convert an old office building or something like that, all of that's becoming possible in some of those states, which is great. Other states are at least looking at overturning occupancy limits. So New Hampshire did it last session, which is great. They got rid of theirs. Texas got rid of them, but in a more limited way. It only applies to certain college towns. So that's great if you're operating co-living more for students or young professionals. Less good if you're anywhere else in the state, which is most of the state. But again, people are at least looking at that. Other places as well. Connecticut looked at it this session. Virginia, I think, is starting to look at it. A bunch of other states are beginning to look at it, but they haven't passed there. But some states are better at housing reform in general. And a good rule of thumb is if the winds of change are blowing favorably for other housing reforms in the state, chances are that'll be good for co-living as well, because a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So you look at Florida, you look at Texas, you look at Virginia recently, New Hampshire, Colorado, definitely. Like all of those states are doing good things. And then some others as well. North Carolina is starting to pick up as well. They've got a good pro-housing movement there. So any of these places, and you can just Google like housing reform, different state, and see there'll be a local coalition. They will tell you about their wins. These people like to celebrate success. So you'll get a good sense quickly of whether things are moving in that state or not. And then it's not unreasonable, I would say, I'm not an investor, but bet on that. Where there's already momentum, chances are that co-living might get looped into that success as well, sooner than later.
Yeah. And I really just want to point out to people with maybe a specific example here that Craig and I encountered. But the devil really is in the details on these things too. In Washington State, for example, my understanding is I think they were the first state in the country to pass that bill that removed the occupancy limits statewide in somewhere between like 2020 and 2018, 2022, somewhere in there. And which sounded like incredibly promising. Great. It sounds like co-living you can do it in a lot more places. But then there was another House bill that came out last year, and I think it turned on January 1 of 2026. That also sounds positive, but we found that it really restricted the cities that we would be able to invest in. The first one that I talked about that was positive addressed the occupancy limits. The second one was more around what we were talking about with zoning and use case. So and please contest if you disagree with this, if you've heard of it. But anyway, there was this bill that passed that said, hey, all cities in the state, you have to allow co-living, and they define what co-living is. That's the actual term that they use. You have to allow co-living on lots that allow 6 units or more, or something like that. But in effect, 6 plexes and up, pretty much you are required to allow co-living on those sort of lots. But then the cities took that and they interpreted it 100% directly, and they said co-living is now a use case in our city code, and it is now allowed in 6 plexes and up. But it is no longer, in fact, it is no longer allowed in single unit, duplex, triplex, fourplex. And I even presented at one of these sessions, talked with different cities, just like you're talking about, Sam. You really do have to get involved. And you can do a lot of this on Zoom too. But I talked to different folks in the different cities, and they were like, yep, that's the new rule. The state said we had to do it that way, and that's the way we did it. And then I went and talked to the lady who wrote it at the state, and she said, oh my goodness, that is not the way we meant for that to be interpreted. And now it's just like a whole mess across the state.
It happens. Like I won't even blame the person that did that, because I've made my share of legislative law howlers as well. But yeah, unintended consequences are a real thing, and bills that are intended to help people sometimes have unintended consequences. And particularly if cities already are feeling touchy because their ability to regulate things is being taken away from them, they will often seize on little gaps that are written in laws or missed out to say, oh, you've legalized this, but you haven't mentioned this. That means I have power to ban it. And it seems like that's what that city did. So that's where good legislative lawyering matters, because unfortunately, not everyone is pro-housing, not everyone's pro-co-living. Some people really don't like the idea of any kind of change in their neighborhood and their town, and they will seize on ways to stop that. So it's a finely balanced game. I find this all the time when I'm writing a housing bill, because I draft a lot of bills for different states. You want to anticipate the most likely ways that cities could interpret something in a bad way and explicitly say, you cannot interpret this to do that. But if you start doing that too much, you're just giving them ideas of clever ways that they can ban housing as well. So every time I'm writing a bill, I'm doing this awkward balancing act. Like, how can I maximize housing? How can I not hurt the people I'm trying to help? But how can I also not just give a playbook to some zoning zealot and some city planning commission somewhere to actually undermine my life's work? And it's stressful and it's a balance. And that's why we need proper statewide reform right there.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. And then, so kind of in this vein, we went over some places that are more likely to be favorable towards co-living. Are there any areas that you would caution people against, or any cities or any states like where you hear that they're like really cracking down on enforcement and maybe there is higher risk in these areas?
A couple come to mind where it's I wouldn't say don't do it, but just be careful. I've been working more in Pennsylvania recently. Pennsylvania is interesting because it's dominated by Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, both of which used to be the home of co-living. Single room occupancy boarding houses was very common there. There was a motion that thankfully got withdrawn at the Philadelphia City Council that would have restricted a lot, whatever co-living is left in a whole district of the city. Fortunately, the council member withdrew it. But so even now we have to play defense as well. It's not just trying to improve the rules of the game. Often people are still trying to ban co-living, unfortunately. And we see that particularly in some larger cities. Places like New York are doing good things. They're trying to legalize co-living more. But any city that has what they call aldermanic privilege or aldermanic prerogative, that basically means that your city council member can opt out of a statewide law. Watch out for those cities, because often those council members will be very responsive to the NIMBYs, the no to housing people. And even if your city passes a good bill, then they can just say, yeah, that's fine with the rest of the city, but we're not doing it. So I don't want to be too pessimistic. I think most places are slowly moving in the right direction, which is good. But you do have to watch out. Some cities are still trying to move backward on this as well. So it's one to watch out for, definitely.
Awesome.
Cool. We're going into the later part of the show here, but I guess what happens like when you get noticed from a city, what do?
I just had a call with someone from the city of Irving in Texas the other day who's going through exactly this. And the city is doing exactly what we're talking about. They rely on the person operating in this slightly gray area. And it's unfortunate as well, because what a lot of cities will do is wait until you've already sunk your money into the investment, until you've even started leasing your property. They may know that this is coming down the pipeline for a long time, but generally speaking, do they approach you politely on day one? No, they'll wait until you're up and running or until you've nearly finished, you've paid your contractor, and then they'll issue with a notice of some kind. And that's exactly what happened to this guy. They put a notice on public land saying this property is being investigated. It just stigmatized the residents inside, made them feel that maybe their housing situation was unsafe going forward, which is unfair. Generally speaking, proactivity is good. So I think it's better if you can possibly establish good relations with your local zoning board, your local inspector, whoever it is. Let them know in advance. You're less likely to encounter that situation where you've already done the thing and then you get flagged. You have to stop later on. So just from an investing standpoint, that seems to make sense to me. Other advice, no, you're right. One of the things that we want to do at the National Co-Living Association is build a co-living operators and tenants bill of rights. And that's just a simple document that explains whatever jurisdiction you're in, what the laws actually are, at least at the state and city level, so that often, unfortunately, inspectors make up the rules as they go along sometimes, or they think they know the rules, but because it's co-living and it's unfamiliar, they get it wrong through good faith sometimes. So I think it'll really help having just a document. You can post it maybe on the door for your tenants so that if they get an enforcement visit, then you can politely show it to them and say, actually, according to City Code section 523, whatever, this isn't allowable use. We conform with it because there are locks on the doors. There are only so many people. I think that will help as well, because another thing that we see sometimes is enforcers, inspectors will come in, they will ask questions. Maybe the tenants don't know how to answer properly. And sometimes just a bad answer to a question can then open a whole world of hurt and further investigation. So at least arming your tenants with something like that can be really helpful as well. So there are little things like that. It's not going to change at a macro level until we change the rules of the game at the state and the city level. But things like that can help with enforcement sometimes at the lower level, and at least hopefully make it a bit less painful. And if we can do that, then so much the better, I think.
Yeah. No, I love that. The main takeaway here is get involved with some of your local authorities. Like, it's not that hard to reach out and have a relationship with your legislative person that will make the rules.
It's worse than it happens in a legislative hearing. I was in a hearing the other day, and I was in Rhode Island. It was the first state that we were trying to pass the Room Act in. I was really excited. It was the first full piece of model legislation I'd ever written. It was going to massively re-legalize all forms of co-living. And I'd built up to this. I'd gone to visit every legislator's office. I'd printed bond pages. I'd educated them. I sat in the hearing. It was a long hearing. The bill before ours was a Airbnb short-term rental bill, and it dragged on forever, and everyone was criticizing them. 4 hours later, I finally get to go up. I sit down. They ask me the first question. My mind goes blank. And they say, Sam, this is your life's work. You came here to do this. They asked you a very simple question, like, what does this bill do? Why do you want to do it? And I just froze. It wasn't great. It didn't matter in the end. It was fine. But yeah, like, that was high stakes. And it's crazy sometimes.
What's crazy is that what you just said, I think, was what I was trying to get at, is when you are talking to a legislative person, let's say it's an individual, what is the angle that you need to take in order to get them to like what you're doing? Is it like is it the affordability play? Is it increasing housing easier play? What's the angle to make them like, how do we sell them?
That's a really good question, and it really depends on the legislator, unfortunately. And I know that's unfair to a lot of you guys, because you probably don't have time to learn and research the legislators' past positions on housing. But depending what political party and depending their ideology, they will respond to different things. And I give you a general rule of thumb, and don't take this as gospel, but if you're talking to a more urban Democrat legislator, they're more likely to generally be pro-housing and understand that, yeah, they want to do things that legalize all forms of housing. They're more likely to be pro-living. If you're talking to a rural Republican, like in Texas, often I'll be surprised the number of rural Republicans that get it instinctively. One, because they want to keep the density in the cities and away from them, thank you very much. But two, they also understand it just from a property rights perspective. Like, they instinctively believe in deregulation and stuff. So that can be great as well. So hitting the kind of ideological themes that the legislator naturally believes in is always good. You'll have more issue generally with suburban legislators that kind of have those areas that are densifying right now, where there's a lot of change and it's leading to a lot of resistance. So there, you're going to have to be a bit more careful and explain how co-living, if you're looking at housing reform, is actually great, because unlike apartment buildings, unlike lot splits and shrinking lot sizes that actively change the look of a neighborhood, co-living, show me two buildings from the outside, which one's a co-living one? You can't tell the difference, right? Because you're just changing what the inside of the building looks like. And that's really helped to win over a lot of kind of suburban legislators and others that are generally worried and responsive to people that are worried about change. Beyond that, what we hope to do through the National Co-Living Association is give you all of this information in advance, so you can tell the association, hey, I want to meet with my local representative. Can you help brief me in advance? And then I can do that. I can say, hey, this person voted for this, and this bill before. They're likely to already be supportive. All you have to do is not screw up, basically. And then that'll help. Or you're meeting with a skeptic here. Here are some ways that you might be able to get through their icy heart and get them to actually believe in co-living. So that's another way that hopefully the Co-Living Association will add value, give you some of that extra intelligence so you're not having to do all the research yourself.
Cool. That's super, super helpful. Honestly, I've never thought of the perspective of keeping the buildings the same.
That was really powerful. That really worked in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island specifically, everyone was worried because co-living was tied up in people's minds with sober living housing or housing for people recently exiting homelessness that had a lot of social issues, and there were crime issues. So people saw it as just something bad that would bring crime to the area. And they saw it as big former converted hotels and nasty tenements. So explaining to them, hey, one of these houses is co-living, which one is it? That really got to them. And they thought, oh, wait, co-living could just be normal, regular people. And that was really powerful. People respond to visual things. So if you've got a nice picture of you and your tenants living in harmony somewhere as well, like that can be great too. Because again, people have just forgotten what co-living is. They don't understand it. So show people sharing a kitchen without it like bursting into flames and a riot breaking out. You've already done like the first step to normalizing it right there.
Yeah, I love it. Normalize it, and then just remove the fears. Sam, this episode, it's a unique. I'm not sure if you've listened to our podcast. If not, what the heck? But
I've had the pleasure of listening to a few episodes. Yeah, I love it. I love what you guys are doing.
Great.
It's
I
awesome.
totally didn't think you would have.
Subscribed on YouTube. I hit the subscribe button.
All right,
let's go. But obviously, like, we took a different angle on this approach because we wanted to make sure that we extracted everything that we could out of you and allowed us to extract as much value as we could out of you. So thank you for sharing. I think the main next step here, Sam, is like if I want to get involved, if someone wants to get involved with this National Co-Living Association, like lobbying group here, like what's the next step? How do we get involved?
Yeah, it's easy. Just Google National Co-Living Association. The website will come right up. You can sign up as a member there. There are different membership tiers, and it's based on how big of an operator you are, like most associations. I think you can join from as little as $50 a month, and that's put to good use. It's going to go toward the legislator education that we're doing. It'll help send me out to different state legislatures to explain to people, to testify on bills that will legalize co-living where you live. It'll also help educate members of the community. There are a whole bunch of other benefits as well you can read about there. So that's the lowest cost thing. If you don't have much time to spend, but you can spend at least $50 a month maybe, then do that. And that will tangibly help our ability to represent the industry. If you want to go a step further, like all of you are sitting on great stories of how you're trying to provide a valuable service, but regulations and rules are making it difficult for you to grow, expand, and invest. And stories like that are what legislators and elected officials love to hear. So you're the really valuable resource, actually. And we want to make it as easy as possible for you to tell those stories, whether that's just writing it down. If a bill comes up for a hearing in a state legislature, we'll make it really easy for you to just type in your name, your zip code. It'll send a letter to your local state representative and senator. We're going to do all of this kind of stuff to automate it, to make it easier for you. And if you want to get more involved, like, we're going to have monthly calls as well, where I tell everyone what's happening in every state around the country, what's moving, where there are threats to co-living, so we can activate people. So if you've got more time to spend, you want to get more involved, you can do that as well and work with me as closely as you want to go meet with legislators, to go support bills, get involved in housing coalitions. So there's a level of involvement for everyone, depending on the level of resources and the amount of time you have. But yeah, Google National Co-Living Association, get involved. I really encourage you to do it.
So I think it's safe to say that if you want to make a change, in particular, if you've got a direct change, go talk to your state legislator. If you just want to make a change in the overall scheme of co-living, join the National Co-Living Association and let Sam do all the work for you. Look how he knows his stuff. He's very articulate. He can definitely stand in before legislative people a lot better than I could, Miller, or probably you either. I'm a huge fan of just, hey, let's just pay the expert. Let's be a part of the association. Go do the thing.
I think is great, right? But it takes both. Yeah. I bring the expertise of how to write a bill and how state legislators work, which is great. You all bring the expertise of how co-living actually works, and you're trying to run it and you're facing into these obstacles. But you put both of us together, your industry knowledge and our knowledge of how the process works. Like, that's how other successful industries get laws changed in their favor. That's how we're going to do it for co-living as well.
For sure. I love it. Sam, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show. Again, so beneficial. Are people able to reach out to you directly, or do you prefer them just to go right to the Co-Living Association?
Absolutely, yeah. I run the world's most boring social media accounts where I talk about legislative law for a living, if you can believe that. It's at LegLawyer, L-E-G-E Lawyer, on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the places. If you want to get in contact with me directly, sam@leglawyer.com, L-E-G-E lawyer.com. If you're having an issue, if you've got an idea for a bill or a policy change you'd like to make, let me know there as well. I'm always happy to nerd out about legislative law, property rights, anything to do with that. So you can get in contact with me there. And I also have a Substack as well, right? Write longer form think pieces, which is leglawyer.substack.com. So you really can't escape me. I'm just everywhere. It's terrible.
You're everywhere. Is it ledge like L-E-G-E, or is it ledge like leg?
Yeah, L-E-G-E. Yeah, not the ledge you fall over, the ledge, which is short for legislature.
Yeah, or not leg lawyer, which is where my head went on how to spell that. But
indeed.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Sam, again, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Again, tons and tons of value. And it was great to meet you as well. So we'll see you next time. And I super appreciate you, man.
My pleasure. Thank you both very much. It's been a blast.
Thanks.
See ya. And that was Sam Hooper Miller. What do you think about Sam?
Yeah, I think I'm super excited to have a go-to guy now, right? I think we always have legal questions. Everyone goes to Claude, everyone goes to ChatGPT and asks them. But I'm glad we have a human in the flesh who has done this sort of regulation before, getting even more heavily involved right now and starting to kind of lead this movement. Yeah, I can't believe we just finally have a fantastic resource.
Yeah, me too, man. This feels like a huge lift off of a lot of people's shoulders, I think. I think the establishment of the co-living association is going to be really big too. But I think we're just approaching it in the correct way where we're trying to partner with the government and with the legislative versus trying to fight them. Right. And I think when you can approach it as a partnership and you can approach it with, hey, we're trying to help you solve your problem, things will get done, things will get passed. And that feels like the approach that Sam takes. It feels like the approach that almost every co-living operator that I talk to takes. And so, yeah, I think it's a great thing. I think Sam seems like a great resource to have. And I'm super excited to have him in our pocket as well, especially as we look to grow and expand. And now when we go to a new city, Miller might just be like, yeah, we should probably call Sam real quick. Like, dude, so. Let's go pay him. I don't even know if he would charge us, but maybe we'll pay him $100 for 30 minutes of his time to be like, all right, man, give us a rundown. What city should we go into? And also the great thing about real estate is like insider trading is totally legal. Mm-hmm. So let's say we talk to Sam and say, hey, right now in West Virginia, yeah, the rules aren't great, but they're about to change them. So if you want to get in, like now is probably the time. And then they go change the rules and then boom, you're there. Right. And so there's like, I don't want to call it insider trading. I want to be careful with my words, but that's insider trading, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the best part is he's not an exclusive resource to us. You guys have his email. Go ask him. He literally said, if you guys have any questions, email him. So how often does a lawyer do that without giving you the bill first? So
yep, exactly. Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for listening all the way to the end. We super, super appreciate all y'all that stay here with us. Like we said earlier in the episode, we're looking to take on more and more management clients. And so if you've got a property that is co-living that you either don't want to do, or you're trying to figure out how to scale it, but don't want to figure out the operations and you just want to outsource the operations, you've got one of the best operators in the world here in Miller. Not me, Miller. But you got one of the best operators here. Again, like we'll be able to get you probably to your goals a lot faster. Just hit me up on Instagram, Craig Curelop, and we can have a chat. And then I think that's it, guys. Also, just leave us a rating and review. We super, super appreciate those rating and reviews. Give us a follow on YouTube, whatever we need, whatever you need, wherever you like to watch us. And we'll see y'all next week.
See ya.